Good afternoon, distinguished delegates, participants here at the Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development. We're very pleased to have you here in the room this afternoon for our launch of the 2023 SDG Partnership Report. I'm pleased to welcome you today. This 2023 edition of the Partnership Report is the 7th in the series, and it is an annual report as a collaboration between ESCAP, the Asian Development Bank, and the UN Development Program. This year's report is entitled Delivering on the Sustainable Development Goals Through Solutions at the Energy, Food, and Finance Nexus. It goes right to the heart of the effects of the current multiple crisis on the critical systems of energy, food, and finance here in the Asia-Pacific region. We are honored to have with us here today the principals of the three author organizations, as well as experts from academia and civil society to provide their insights on transforming the energy and food sectors, preparing them for future shocks, and ensuring that no one, of course, is left behind. Before we begin, we're pleased to have a short video to introduce the main findings of the report. It's now my pleasure and honor to introduce our distinguished speakers. Now, to share with us the findings from the report, we will start with Ms. Armida Salcia Alice-Jabana, Undersecretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of ESCAP, Mr. Woo Chong-um, Managing Director General of the Asian Development Bank, and Mr. Christophe Baiwei, Deputy Regional Director for Asia and the Pacific, and Director of the UNDP Regional Hub here in Bangkok. Afterwards, we will invite our distinguished guest speakers to also share their perspectives. So without any further ado, I give the floor now to Madam Executive Secretary to deliver her presentation.
Very good afternoon to Excellencies, distinguished participants. I would like now to just briefly present the 2023 SDG Partnership Report, which this year focuses on delivering on the SDGs through solutions at the energy, food, and finance nexus. And afterwards, my colleagues, my partner, Mr. Woo Chong-um from ADB and Mr. Christophe Baiwei from UNDP will provide the more detailed findings, recommendations of the report. This is the 7th thematic ESCAP-ADB-UNDP have published as part of a partnership that dates back to the era of the MDGs. So the report takes a closer look at the implication that multiple overlapping crises have on countries and for attaining the SDGs. And at the same time, it explores opportunities, innovative solutions, and the way forward to transform the interconnected or the nexus between or among energy, food, and finance to achieve a greener, more inclusive, and resilient as well as sustainable future. As we all know, the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, the effects of the war in Ukraine and worsening climate change, together referred to as the poly or multi-crisis, have negatively affected the Asia-Pacific region's energy, food security, as well as fiscal soundness. This multi-crisis has plunged millions more people into poverty and reversed years of development gains. It is disproportionately affecting the most vulnerable people in the region as food and energy prices spike, and the resulting surge in inflation has worsened consumption inequalities and created a cost of living crisis. Fiscal positions remain under greater stress than before, which is impeding the ability of governments to support vulnerable households and economies further from decline. At the same time, climatic and natural disasters continue to place a high toll on the most vulnerable groups who have the least ability to respond. And on the impact of this multi-crisis on SDGs, the region's improvements in access to affordable, reliable, and modern energy services, or Goal 7, have been set back, with millions of people lacking the ability to pay for electricity services and shouldering the increased cost of energy. This has also diverted urgent investment needed to strengthen progress in renewable energy. Hunger and malnutrition under Goal 2 are on the rise, with an estimated 425 million people in the region undernourished and more than 1 billion people moderately or severely food insecure. Under Goal 8 on decent work and economic growth, the outlook for the region's economies remains uncertain. Labor markets in many countries continue to operate in crisis mode, with an incomplete recovery and lower real wages. With narrow fiscal spaces and high debt burdens, countries face widening financing gaps for achieving SDGs and reversing a lasting impact on the region's development prospects. Other goals are also directly and indirectly impacted, given the highly interlinked nature of the SDGs. Now, may I turn to this energy, food, and financing nexus about the solutions. The region is witnessing promising practices and innovative approaches that strengthen the nexus and drive the much-needed transformation of the region's energy, food, and financing system. Several examples of such good practices are presented in the report. For instance, and apologize if this is too small, but you are very much welcome or urged to look the details at the report. So the several examples of good practices, among others, are for example, the use of smart and low carbon farming, such as solar assisted irrigation, electric farming vehicles, and other innovative technologies, offers untapped opportunities. Upcycling agricultural waste, curbing food waste and losses, optimizing resource use, and reducing waste and environmental degradation. Another examples is awareness program on changing diets and reducing meat consumption can support sustainable consumption patterns. We see small-scale solutions that change the way rural farmers participate in agricultural value chain and have greater access to finance. We also see efforts to accelerate reforms of subsidies to improve fiscal space, and scale up innovative financing options, such as the use of SDG bond, blended finance, and crowdfunding to support sustainable energy and food transition. At the regional and sub-regional levels, the report showcases initiatives that remove cross-border trade barriers and advance just energy transition that are critical in these times of crisis. And last but not least, the multi-crisis has highlighted the need for new models of energy and food production that bring in stronger nexus of energy, food, and finance for long-term recovery. As such, the report highlights three main priorities going forward. The first one is that we need to strengthen multilateral and multi-sectoral partnership across the intersecting or interlinkages of energy, food, and finance to foster coordinated efforts and coherent and cohesive policy solutions at all levels. We also need to develop more data-driven and adaptive institutions that would enable better governance and response to crisis and address unforeseen challenges over the medium to longer term. And finally, we need to boost efforts that orient finance towards SDGs. It is critical to align public and private financial flows with SDGs in general, as well as to mobilize new sources of financing to transform the energy and food system to deliver on SDGs. With that, I'm very pleased to stop here and hand over to my colleagues, both from ADB and UNDP, who will reflect further on these opportunities. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Executive Secretary. I'm pleased now to turn the floor over to Mr. of the ADB.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the Asian Development Bank, it's my pleasure to be here at this very important launch event. Before I get into the substance of the matter, I just wanted to reflect on how important our partnership is with the ESCAP and UNDP. As many of you might know, actually, ADB was given birth from the ESCAP back in the 60s. And in fact, the actual charter was, I think, signed somewhere in this space. And there, we still have pictures of that event in our headquarters. This year marks my 30th year in ADB. And some miraculous reason, I've never been here until today. And what a better occasion to be here than to jointly launch this publication, and we deeply appreciate. And also UNDP, the partnership that we have is inseparable, because you can't go to places where you can't go. And some of the challenging places that you help implement, for example, in Afghanistan and Myanmar and other places, it's such a valuable partnership. So this joint publication actually is one of the concrete outputs that we jointly produced for many years, and it's a pleasure to be here. And this marks another milestone in the long history of partnership, as I just mentioned, between the ESCAP, ADB, and UNDP to advance the Sustainable Development Goals. And our partnership, the Asia-Pacific SDGs Partnership, provides a vital platform for us to address the challenges facing our region, engage diverse stakeholders, and disseminate knowledge. This year's report addresses the confluence of crises involving finance, food, and energy sectors, and this has created a perfect storm on the back of the pandemic, which has unleashed economic turmoil and disrupted livelihoods across Asia and the Pacific. This has set further back on progress towards the SDGs, and this year's ambitious report serves as a call to action to better understand the interconnectedness of energy, food, and finance systems, and to create opportunities for innovative solutions for a more sustainable, inclusive, and resilient future. At the crux of this debate is the relationship between food systems and climate change. Food production is one of the largest drivers of climate change, Meanwhile, climate change is one of the key threats to the food security. Countries in the Asia-Pacific region has adopted smart and sustainable farming practices to shift away from intensive use of energy and chemical fertilizers and pesticides that contribute to environmental degradation. Among others, we have seen innovations that have unlocked the promise of data science and artificial intelligence to optimize the use of agricultural inputs such as water and fertilizers. Similar innovations are also found in the energy sector to optimize resources by maximizing efficiency and minimizing waste. Creative examples include turning industrial waste into biocharcoals and turning waste and residual raw materials from the agriculture sector into biodiesel for use by the aviation industry. As I mentioned in the SDG Summit plenary session earlier, the attainment of the SDGs will hinge upon the level of investments for the goals. According to the OECD, the financing gap for the SDGs in developing countries worldwide is estimated to be $4.9 trillion per year from 2020 to 2025. Mobilizing private finance to support efforts to transform food and energy systems is crucial. Considering the pressure that government budgets are under, the report states the need for recalibrating public finance to augment physical space and public investment in food and energy systems reform. And one solution is to align public financial management practices with SDGs through tools such as Climate Change Budget Integration Index. And for example, the Climate Fiscal Framework of Bangladesh includes climate public finance tracking as a key component. Countries have also started exploring new approaches to domestic resource mobilization, such as carbon pricing. Regarding the private financing, products such as SDG bonds, SDG sukuk, and blended finance have been utilized to accelerate the uptake of renewable energy and sustainable agricultural practices. To support greater innovations in the financial sector and to support the attainment of the SDGs for hunger and energy, a conducive regulatory environment is crucial. It is thus important to develop a capacity of the financial market regulators to manage risks from climate change and facilitate low carbon transition. The report also emphasizes the importance of regional cooperation and integration to tackle the fragility of food and energy systems. Reducing trade barriers is one crucial solution, and in the energy sector, this is exemplified by the multi-country cooperation to facilitate regional electricity trade in the Greater Mekong sub-region led by the Regional Power Trade Coordination Committee. In the context of food security, regional bodies such as the APEC Policy Partnership on Food Security are helping regional countries weather the crisis. The diverse solutions showcased in this year's report at the regional, sub-regional, national, and subnational levels show that the region is full of innovations to deal with the challenges emanating from the current crisis. As with many other crises we have faced before, we can turn this into an opportunity to transform existing approaches to food and energy systems. And thank you very much, and congratulations again for the launch of this event, of the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. I'd like to now invite Mr. Baiwei to give his presentation.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished participants, let me first thank you for your interest in this report and also for attending this launch late in the afternoon. This is very much appreciated. And speaking from the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, I would also like to highlight the very high importance that we attach to our cooperation with UN ESCAP and the Asian Development Bank, ADB. This is really, I think, an excellent example of three institutions working together for the 2030 agenda and the SDG in Asia-Pacific. And the partnership report is one example of our cooperation, but we have much more at the regional level and also at the country level, and we look forward to continuing this with ESCAP and ADB. Now, going back to the report, I'd like to elaborate on what Ibu Armida presented and build on what Mr. Hom presented just now. and maybe highlight 3 streams of the recommendation of the report that you may find relevant in your country. The first streams relate to partnership and the call for a rethinking about partnerships at the regional and the national level. The report rightly observes, I believe, that to address one specific issue, the approach remains most of the time a single sector approach, single sector strategy that are undertaken by sector-specific stakeholder aiming at changes in a specific sector. The problem is that this approach doesn't work anymore. Maybe it was never optimal, but in the context of the COVID and the poly-crisis, there is actually a need for building on the interconnection between sector and reflect that in the policies. And I think the report very convincingly used the connection between energy, food, and finance to make the case for this interconnected approach to plan, to have an alignment on the planning and the policies design, and then for have at the practical level solutions that build, integrate this interconnection. The report also, and you saw that in the video, calls for a new impetus in partnership at the regional level, building on the existing one, doing more on the existing one. And for example, the regional trade bodies can actually do more in terms of analyzing the situation and the interconnection, and also try to build new regional partnerships to face the volatility and the certainty that we are facing in Asia-Pacific. So more regional cooperation is definitely needed. The second stream relates to governance and the need to have agile and data-driven institutions. So that's governance not in the traditional sense of the word, but governance that is agile, that is adaptive, and that is most importantly anticipatory. Because this is all about anticipating the risks to be able to address them. And that's, the case the report is making, using again the example of energy, food, and finance. And that, to happen, that requires data. I mean, for a long time, we've emphasized the need of data, but it's even more important now in the change of rapid change to have data in real time, to be able actually to predict the consumer reaction with respect to energy volatility in prices, for instance. So we need data. We need actually to harness more the technology that exists for data collection in Asia-Pacific. Not that it's not being done, but there is a potential that is insufficiently exploited. So use of technology is important. And also go beyond the National Statistic Bureau, which have a very important role to play. But the report made a very valid point that you have a wealth of data, reliable data, that can be collected and shared by the private sector. And we should not deprive ourselves of the use of this data, which of course may require some changes in regulations, in policy, to incentivize the private sector to share this data, but also regulate this. So there is a whole stream of thought to be developed in terms of data, with the objective to have the institutional capacity to continuously monitor risk, because that's what we need, and we see that in the current context in Asia-Pacific in particular, to also plan, but not in the sense, again, of traditional planning, but plan for multiple scenarios that can evolve rapidly, and then be able to deliver a response with speed. And for this, we need institutions that are agile. So a whole stream of recommendations in this report is on this topic. And the third one is about finance, and finance for the SDGs. It does include a call for social protection, adaptive social protection in Asia-Pacific, which is something that United Nations, ESCAP-UNDP, and others have been very actively advocating for, because COVID-19 has actually shown the importance of having adaptive social protection system well in place to cushion the impact of the shocks on the population. And I think what's happening now with other shocks underline the need for adaptive social protection. But there are other dimensions in terms of finance. In particular, the report notes that there is increasing interest in Asia-Pacific to use the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, as a framework for impact measurement. And the report actually encouraged the use of the SDGs as a framework for investment-ready, bankable projects in energy and food sector. And as UNDP, we see in a number of countries some very good examples of the use of SDG as such a framework. And finally, the report looked at the role of financial regulators, making the case that they have actually a very fundamental role to play to manage risk from climate change and to smooth the transition to low carbon economies. But to do so, they need to integrate climate change and those transition risks in their modeling, and also change the regulations, for instance, in terms of information disclosure or capacity and liquidity requirements. Now, the three streams that I've just very briefly presented to you are actually complementary. So they have to come together to be able to address all the challenges and make use of the connection that exists between the food, the energy, and the finance sector. And with this, I just hope that I've added to your interest in reading the report and using its recommendation in your countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baiwei. We now move on to our panel discussion. Each of the speakers, we ask that you keep your remarks to about 5 minutes for each intervention. And my pleasure now to introduce our first speaker. Mr. Wong Sapai is an associate professor in energy engineering and the deputy director of Science and Technology Research Institute at Chiang Mai University in Thailand. Professor Wongkot, my question to you is, from your extensive research on emissions mitigation and energy efficiency, can you tell us what are the most promising solutions in the Asia-Pacific region that currently address the nexus of energy, food, and finance? And can you also please share some examples of successful policies that can facilitate the energy transition and promote food security that can be applied in the different contexts here in the Asia-Pacific region?
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for ESCAP and also ADB and UNDP for invitation me. First time to be in this room also. And Chiang Mai University, my university, also very proud to be announced here that we will pledge on to be the carbon neutrality by 2032. This means around 9 years from now. We would like to be one of the very first among Thai university in Thailand that to be pledging on the carbon neutrality university. Luckily, we are in Chiang Mai, so we have forests that can be absorbed the greenhouse gas, and we also many things, and we are very serious on putting our all effort to be the carbon neutrality university according to the next 9 years. Thank you very much for the question. I would like to say that something that we can have to be discussed today is very serious, especially if you are living in Thai more than 1 week. You may know that in Chiang Mai, or even in the northern and northeastern region of Thailand, we found big problem, basically based on the food crop. They burn it a lot, even in northern of Thailand and our neighborhood country. That's come from the lack of knowledge in terms of the food or even the crop burning every year. It will be happening in the beginning of January, February, and this year it's very dry year, and then it will be raising up our PM 2.5, including PM 10. This is come from the reason that the networking, the knowledge sharing, and what is Dr. Christophe mentioned about the partnership is not success. We have this problem for more than 10 years. The linking between the energy harvest in northern Chiang Mai and the linking between the food. In Thailand, we are doing quite well, in my opinion, to make the zoning in case of the food for zoning and the food for biofuel. And in the future, we are trying to setting up that by the energy in transition, the biofuel will be less consumption in Thailand, but the electricity vehicle will come instead. So this means that in the future, electrification will come, and the situation between the energy zoning from food and the food for eating, it will be getting better situation. However, in the past, we do it very quite well. But when I ask my students from Myanmar why they are not so good in terms of the managing, they said that the big problem they come from the lack of knowledge in terms of the doing things and link together between food and energy, including the water instead. In my opinion, the major point that we need to find out the problem is about we have to do things together, partnership or even the networking that can help every country to do things collaboration together to solve the nexus problem. And international organization, for example, in UNDP or even in JEF, you can give us the finance model. You can let us know the finance model. One example is Thailand is now focused about the green taxonomy. Taxonomy, we hope it a lot. In next year, we try to announce our green taxonomy for the first time. It will be setting up the priority to set up the how financial mechanism in Thailand can support the green bond, the soft loan for energy efficiency or renewable energy, or even the food things that we can manage together. I think for the success case of the good policy in the future come from finance. Carbon credit is one of another choice, but green taxonomy, in my opinion, should come first, and then every financial mechanism can come after that. Yeah, I think we should start from the green taxonomy first. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Wonggot. Let me now turn to Ms. Jyotsna Mohan. She is the Regional Coordinator for the Asia Development Alliance. Jyotsna, we would like to hear from you about how civil society organizations in the Asia-Pacific region are responding to these crises, and what are some of the innovative approaches they've been taking to work on this nexus of food, energy, and finance, including any cross-country collaborations driven by CSOs.
Thank you so much. So we have seen that what has happened in last 2 years, the COVID situation has made the situation disastrous, and there has been increasing climate crisis, debt crisis, energy and food crisis, war and conflict with the shrinking civic space in our region. And the Global Sustainable Development Report 2023, also this gives us a sobering account of where we stand in terms of progress towards the Agenda 2030. Asia-Pacific is the battleground where the war with the SDGs or the climate action will be won or lost. So we have been given a growth narrative, which is development delusion, and we must go beyond it. In fact, the corporations and the capitalist state continue to give us a sense of development progress, but we heard last year, we are hearing this year that we will not be able to achieve the SDGs until 2065. And in terms of gender mainstreaming and education, it will take another couple of hundreds of years to achieve that. So I think keeping that in mind, there has been some of the things that I really wanted to flag in from this stage. There has been no dearth of example in our region, especially from the civil society, and there are cases actually we have seen in many countries in South Asia or other kind of parts of Asia, Southeast Asia, where there has been some sort of cooperation. We have heard about partnership. Just now we heard about the data things from our speakers. So I really wanted to emphasize on some of those, why partnership is very important. But when we talk about partnership, it's mostly the member states, private institutions, the banks, and then the civil society somewhere. So when we are talking about partnership, we are talking about equal partnership. So civil society, we may be deficient in resource and in terms of financial resource, but we are very rich in skills and experience and outreach, and that needs to be leveraged upon. I mean, I think it's something I really wanted to say from this stage. There has been some safety net program in Bangladesh, which has been contributing to the reduction of poverty and vulnerability by addressing a range of population growth through different forms of assistance. These include the provision of income security for the elderly, widows, and persons with disabilities, generating temporary employment for working aged men and women, and supporting the healthy development of young mothers and children. There's another project that I wanted to emphasize here, which has a very good partnership with the civil society. Is a European Union funded project, and which is actually started by the World Vision, and in partnership with the local NGOs, policymakers, and many district level workers. And this project works with the government and the local stakeholders to enhance the transparency and accountability in the provision of the project. I think the other thing that I really wanted to again emphasize is transparency and accountability and communication. I think it's very important, because this morning I was attending a meeting where we were told that IMF is not putting any conditionality actually, but actually it's a myth that IMF is putting conditionality. I want to really agree with this fact, but I also wanted to know, what is it possible that if we had the access to that kind of document where we know it's not a myth, there is no conditionality put by the IMF, and it's only the member states who have the who can take the decision. So some sort of transparency and accountability that also we want. Apart from that, there are some very good example of civil society. CPD, which is called CSO Platform for Development Effectiveness, and that works on the on the line of South-South cooperation. I think South-South cooperation is very important. In Timor-Leste, the civil society have contributed towards the implementation of social audit activities that focuses on the specifics such as education, agriculture, health, and basic infrastructure, that too with the government. So I wanted to say that there are examples where the civil society is working with the government. They are working with the financial institution. We have seen some example from ADB also that or they are working with the civil society. But I also want to emphasize that just use our experience, use our outreach, because we can give you many more such examples which can be replicated to other region. And finally, I just wanted to say that it's very important to address why. For example, this economic meltdown in Pakistan or Sri Lanka. So we are talking about a lot of solution, but it would be really nice if you could actually see why it had happened. If we actually if we target the why, maybe we can get more sustainable answer. Also, we need to go beyond the GDP centric growth, incorporate sustainability on priority. Also use citizens level data, because we have a lot of data at the micro level. You have a lot of quantitative data, we have lots of qualitative data, so that can be really substantiated with that. So that I really wanted to say, because and the last, use the regional and global forums like platforms like G20, BRICS, because G20 has a financial track. So and then BRICS, G7, SAARC, ASEAN, and this is again it's just if you look at the G7, G20. Last year Indonesia was one Asian country. This year India is organizing, and then again G7 is organized by Japan this year. So we can also take this advantage that it's coming to our region, so we can actually take advantage and take and we can actually do a lot of advocacy through these platforms. Then BRICS, NDB, BRICS, and ASEAN and SAARC are some of the important platforms that can be helped to further intensify the regional cooperation. SAARC is not working anymore, but there is a People SAARC that is working. So actually we can again leverage on those already existing platform. We don't need to create anything new. So with that, I wanted to close this. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jyotsna. We now turn to Mr. Win Ellis. He is the Executive Director of Sustainable Rice Platform. Win, let me ask you, as the head of a global multi-stakeholder alliance working to transform the global rice sector, What are your views on the key drivers to transforming the agriculture sector in Asia and the Pacific and improving smallholder livelihoods while reducing the energy footprint of agriculture production? Can you also please elaborate on some specific innovative solutions that you are seeing in the nexus of food, finance, and energy?
Thank you, and good afternoon, good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. First, congratulations to ESCAP, UNDP, and ADB on the publication of this report. It was a really inspiring report to read, particularly because the narrative, the analysis, and the recommendations that you have made in this report chime so well with some of the work that we are doing in the rice sector through the initiative that I lead, the Sustainable Rice Platform, and I'll be telling you why in the next few minutes. So transforming the agricultural sector in the Asia-Pacific region really centers around rice. It really has to. It is the lifeblood of most Asian societies, which produce and consume 90% of the world's rice. And globally, as we know, roughly 1 billion people depend on rice either for livelihoods or for calories. So when we talk about multiple SDGs, there are touch points for rice as an entry point, either as a causative factor or as a challenge. So many of the people who depend on rice live on $1.50 a day. So this is very much a measure to address poverty alleviation. And yet, despite all of this, rice remains a neglected crop. Sustainability standards for high-profile crops such as oil palm, coffee, cocoa have been with us now for something like 30 years and are quite mature in their implementation. And yet their sustainability profiles, whichever metric you might choose, whether it's water, climate, or resource use, that sustainability footprint is dwarfed by that of rice. Rice, for example, accounts for something like 13% of global nitrogen fertilizer use. So there's your energy connection for a start. 30 to 40% of global freshwater use, and around 10% of global anthropogenic methane emissions. So there's a lot to unpack in the sustainability footprint of rice. Moreover, I guess as well as contributing to climate change, rice is also its victim. The future of rice farming here in Asia, and particularly in the deltaic regions, stretching from Bangladesh all the way across to China and the Mekong Delta, are especially vulnerable to multiple climate impacts: salinization, seawater rise, temperature, and so on. Given these challenges then, how can the global rice sector meet an expected 25% global supply shortfall in 2050 from a diminishing resource base? Now that's really the kind of challenge that galvanized UNEP and IRRI and private sector partners back in 2011 to establish the Sustainable Rice Platform. And the initial challenge was to develop practical tools and scalable approaches to reduce the energy, water, and climate footprint of rice amongst smallholders. So fast forward to today, the Sustainable Rice Platform is a global initiative of 110 institutional members across the stakeholder spectrum. We work with value chain actors and the international development community to drive transformational change by promoting adoption of climate smart, sustainable best practices based on the SRP standard for sustainable rice production. And we were actually hosted here in Bangkok at the UNEP offices for the first 6 years of our development. So we very much appreciate the support of the UN community in our early years. And indeed, it goes on. We have 4 UN agencies who count themselves as members of SRP. In the market today, we have now roughly 150,000 tons of milled rice sold under the SRP verified label in 11 countries in the European Union, Scandinavia, UK, and most recently in Singapore. So it seems to me that transformative change across the global sector will be contingent upon two major drivers. Firstly, the adoption, and these were well reflected in the report, I think. Firstly, the adoption by governments and development partners, and secondly, engagement by the international financial community. So the first part, our engagement with governments, it's really based on the establishment in key producing countries here in Asia of national chapters for the SRP, where local stakeholder groups can work together to advance the agenda and get the principles of sustainability embedded in policy. Secondly, we are participating in a number of scaling projects funded by GEF, Global Environment Facility, as part of a consortium which we've called the Sustainable Rice Landscapes Initiative, comprising UNEP, FAO, the International Rice Research Institute, GIZ, and SRP itself. So we've been working since 2018, and we now have a portfolio of, I think it's 7 or 8 projects around the region, which are about to begin implementation, including here in Thailand, to advance the sustainability agenda in these different countries. Most recently, and I'll end here, we are about to implement a GEF-funded project to develop innovative sustainable rice financing facilities, initially in 3 countries. And this project was actually launched at COP very recently, in Egypt, in Bangladesh, in Cambodia, and in Vietnam, working with governments and private sector financial partners to structure a new blended finance instrument to address financing gaps in the sector, with different approaches to accommodate different appetites for risk and ticket prices and so on, ticket sizes. We're very excited at this emerging partnership because it can help to really create new pathways to scale and support transformation towards a resource efficient and climate efficient, climate resilient rice sector. And I think I would very much welcome further participation and conversations so that we can unite behind this common cause. Thank you.
Thank you for those insights, Win. We do have a little bit of time for questions from the room. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or your nameplate. We do ask you if you please also identify yourself and who the question is being directed to. I see we have a question here in front from the delegation of Pakistan.
Thank you very much for this very informative session. Insights into the report were very, very useful for all the participants. My question is just about the presenter who talked about the rice project. Pakistan is one of the leading rice exporter and rice growers. So does that 7 countries project includes Pakistan as well?
I didn't plant this question. This is a question that came ad hoc from the delegate. Indeed, Pakistan is a really important and leading player in our activity, in our work, and is the primary supply base for basmati rice that enters the European market. We had a series of projects which have actually just ended, funded by SDC, the Swiss government, in collaboration with private sector partners. Mars Food was one of them, anchor private sector partners, and they continue to buy large quantities of sustainable rice from Pakistan and India, actually, to supply their Ben's original rice. So yes, indeed, and it very much chimes again with the overall, I think, political agenda within Pakistan, where there are major issues with water scarcity and also climate change as well. Rice represents something like, I believe, it's the 2nd largest foreign exchange earner in Pakistan, if I'm not wrong. So we are really anchored in Pakistan as a major partner in this effort. Thank you.
Thank you. I see there is 2 more. We'll take the 2 and then we'll wrap up the session. I see the question. Sorry, there is a delegation in the back. I can't see your placard, sorry. If you could please identify yourself and again, who you're directing your question to.
So we are the Children and Youth Group, and I'm the Youth Delegate to the APFSD Youth Forum 2023. So my question is, on the partnership and the goals, do we have an agenda for youth and children to actively participate in terms of food, finance, and energy nexus? And also, we know that youth need to be in the decision-making level in our partnership with other sectors, including private sectors, government agencies, and other UN organizations, private sectors, and civil society as well. So we are hoping for youth and children participation in a partnership program as well, to have young people to empower us and to engage us into your programs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Fiji?
Thank you, moderator. Let me just take this opportunity to thank all the panelists and the presenters for the excellent presentation this afternoon. My question, again, whilst learning something new every day, particularly on these RISE initiatives, I'm reminded of the law of diminishing returns. You mentioned about the impacts of the climate change in the Mekong area in terms of your production projections for the next couple of years. And this obviously will be negated by climate change. And I'm just wondering how much of your projections is the adversity of climate change affecting food security in this greater Asia region, taking climate change as an issue. Because I know for sure with the law of diminishing return, no matter how much you put in, the utility will reduce. And how much of that reduction is due to climate change? Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I, yeah, so let me respond to the first question, which I think I heard it from youth group, right?
Yes.
And about partnership. And I'll leave the rice question to our, Mr. Ellis, which appears to be very popular, maybe because it's a gluten-free thing. But so in terms of the youth, at the end of the day, we're doing all this sustainable development work because of our future generation. So what better group of people to engage than the youth? And youth, I assume you mean around 18 to 30-year-old age group. And this is something that we struggle in ADB quite a bit because the nature of our business, we are quite old, the people are actually preparing projects and implementing. But we did recognize about 10 years ago that we need to engage much more systematically with the youth group. So we've set up this initiative called the Youth for Asia. And we are working with various young people to help us in designing projects actually, and by linking them with the project management unit of the executing agencies so that you can help us design it. And then also, especially in the implementation side of it as well, and giving that exposure to the young people, the exposure to the project management unit also gives you an opportunity to participate and get the experience that's needed for you to maybe eventually come into our organization. So if you're interested, just email me. I'll connect you to the people who are working on that.
Thank you. Thank you. Win?
Thank you. Thank you. I think the second part of the question was to do with the climate impacts of rice. I mean, I'm conscious that in this room, I'm sure there are climate experts here who have far more expertise than I have on the subject. But the research that we've seen from Asian Development Bank and International Rice Research Institute seems to have arrived at a consensus that climate change is affecting rice in multiple ways. Let's take temperature, for example. For every 1 degree rise in average night temperature over the growing season, yields are going to decrease by 10%. And that's massive. Also, because climate change has such extreme impacts on water availability, it is likely that rice production will actually move away from the South and Southeast Asia, and gradually over the next 50 to 100 years, move north and move west. So we'll see less rice grown in South and Southeast Asia, and particularly, as I mentioned, in the deltaic areas, which are subject to these extreme sort of impacts, including weather extremes, weather events, as well as sea level rise and salinity and so on. People have mentioned carbon dioxide fertilization as something that might actually boost yields. And there has been some research to show that this is actually going to have a negligible effect on yields, in fact. And even worse, it is likely also that CO2 fertilization, where it boosts yields, actually reduces the nutritional content of that rice. So I think the sector is in for a rough ride in terms of climate change, particularly given the lack of resilience of bottom of pyramid farmers to respond to climate change impacts. I hope that's answered your question, though not in a very optimistic way.
Thank you very much, Win, for that response. And also, again, thank you for the questions. We now come to the end of our session, but just before concluding, perhaps I'd like to give the three principals opportunity again, just to share one final thought on the report. Let me just start with Ibu Armida from ESCAP.
Thank you very much for all the feedback and inputs. And maybe, if I may, key takeaways from the report are three, of course, additional, aside from those already in the report. First is very important. We increasingly see the interlinkages among the sectors. In this case, the sectors being highlighted are food, energy, and finance, but we can easily add water, for example. So food, energy, water, and of course, finance, fiscal financing. So therefore, if we approach the issues, challenges, and problems in a more integrated, holistic manner, so we will be better able to address the problem, the issues, and therefore also in terms of the solutions, as well as better address climate, for example, climate change impact, climate change, accelerate climate action, and contribute to sustainable development, which is our ultimate goal. And secondly, we also learn from the report and also from all of you. You know better, especially colleagues who are working on the ground. In which there are good examples actually abound. So when I presented briefly on the report earlier, for example, if I just can reread again one quick example, the use of smart and low carbon farming, such as solar assisted irrigation, electric farming vehicles, and other innovative technologies offers untapped opportunities. But those examples are already there, right? Already there, already in practice. But it's not yet wide scale. So therefore, how to scale it up in a more structured manner. So therefore, it could be accelerated in terms of implementation, as well as in terms of its benefits, as well as the co-benefits, right? Because the benefits will be multiple. And third, we also learn the benefit or advantage of approaching this at various levels. Of course, here we are at the regional level. This platform is a regional platform. Sub-regional level, for example, Southeast Asia, with their respective organizations such as ASEAN and so on, as well as to translate it down further to the country level. So this issue, why we, the team, pick up this food, energy, and finance. So actually because of the impact of the war, right? Immediately on this food, energy, and also finance. But that's global, right? But the impact are felt at the country level, at the regional level. But then we research, we publish, we give recommendation global, but then we bring it to wider audience, all the stakeholders, to sub-regional as well as hopefully at the national level, it can be translated further, again, in a more structured and systematic manner, not only by government, but by the stakeholders. So therefore, we can come up with this a more integrated and holistic solution.
Thank you very much, Ibu.
So maybe I can pass on to
Wuchang, please.
to Mr. Oh.
Yes, hello. Is it working? Oh yeah. So I think the specifics of the report you can see by reading them. But I just want to make one point about the technology. When in 2018 we set our initial climate finance target to $80 billion through 2030, but in 2021, in the midst of COVID-19, when our climate financing were down in a big way, we decided to up the ante to 100 billion, and people thought we were crazy within ADB. I think we were a bit crazy because it's a huge jump. But what we did in terms of reaching that new ambition was we imagined what the world will be like 2025. Don't project based on what we know today. And this is in relation to technology. I think that's very much covered in our report. We have to imagine what the new technology can bring us in every sector, in energy, food, and so forth. So we adopted the approach where, what will the world look like in 2025? Electric vehicles, there was battery storage, and all those things for energy security. And we projected what the investments will be like. And also we imagined what kind of transformation that can happen in some of the key sectors, like in agriculture, because that's the adaptation bit, where we need to, again, adopt the technology so that we can see what type of new things we can do. So one key technology is that, one key takeaway from this report is, in order for us to implement the findings from the report, we really need to look forward and imagine what the world will be for the future, for the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you, Wuchang. Christoph, please.
Thank you. Well, as a reader, my main takeaway is that it's actually not only necessary, needed, but feasible, possible to capitalize on the interconnection between food, energy, and finance in a way that contributes to domestic development and also advance the 2030 agenda and the sustainable development goals. I think that's really what the report demonstrates and what we need to work towards in Asia-Pacific.
Thank you very much. And once again, that brings us to the end of our launch event. Thank you to our three principals. Thank you to our three experts who shared with us their insights. And we now like to invite you all to further explore the report if you're interested. It's available online on the SDG Partnership website. It can also be downloaded or accessed via the QR code that has been shown on this, shown on the screen now. So with that, let me wrap it up. Thank you again very much to the audience for staying around. And I don't want to stand any longer between you and the reception. So please do join us outside, just outside for our dinner reception this evening. Thank you very much and have a good evening, everybody.